Here we go. Oh, now we're streaming. Here we go. Oh, now we're streaming. Hello, world. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Patrick Durgan. I am the founder and publisher of Kenny Editions, the publisher of three, in one case, brand new, and in these other cases, rather new books. And we've gathered their authors and translators for this reading. We will hear from Nathalie Quintane, good evening, author of Tomatoes, and appended to that text, translator Marty Hiatt and I decided to include Quintane's essay, Why Doesn't the Far Left Read Literature? This book also includes a foreword by Juliana Spar. So we are launching that today, and we are also celebrating the recent publication of Hieroglyphs of the Inverted World by Rob Halpern, and The Science of Departures by Adalber Salas Hernández, translated by Robin Myers, with, I should mention, an extraordinary cover design by my co-conspirator, Farideh Mereb, who I'm sure is out there listening and watching with you all. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are so inclined, if you have a question or comment or want to check in the chat section on YouTube, please do that. Any questions you want the readers today to address, I will relay to them, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the reading. Introductions will be done by our respective translators and or the poets themselves, because I could go on forever, but those sort of vainglorious, long-winded introductions you get at poetry readings I do not have a very high tolerance for. So I won't bother you with that. Now I would like to send it over to Nathalie and to Marty, and they will take it from here. Yes. Off you go.
Maybe, Nathalie, maybe I'll just say a quick word and then I'll let you introduce the book. Yeah, I just wanted to say briefly, thanks a lot to Patrick for taking on the project. And it's good to have this work in English. I think it's an important work. And I guess, yeah, I don't have a lot of need to also introduce at length Nathalie's work, which is very well known in France, or the specific work. Nathalie will just give a few words of context and then we'll read an excerpt. I guess I just wanted to say one thing briefly about it, which is that maybe my interest in this work, in working on translating it, kind of stems from the way that it interacted with a certain kind of style, had a certain kind of style and navigation of, yeah, quite extremely bad political situation, I guess. That's all I wanted to say. Nathalie, would you like to?
Donc, je vais situer le moment où le livre a été écrit, il y a un peu plus de 10 ans. Tu translates, j'allais dire. Tu traduis au fur et à mesure, non? Tu m'entends? Allô?
So Nathalie's just going to provide some context about Tomatoes, which the book was written quite quickly in around 2009 during a particular moment.
Et le livre pose la question de la transmission politique.
The book poses the question of political transmission or continuity.
Parce que ma génération, donc celle des années 80 en France,
because Nathalie's generation, mainly from the 80s in France,
quand elle n'a pas participé, par exemple, à l'activisme autour du sida,
not having participated in the activism around AIDS,
a eu le sentiment qu'il y avait une coupure franche entre ce qui s'était passé dans les années 60-70, après 68,
so it had the sense that there had been a rupture between what happened in the 80s and the 70s after 68,
et ce moment de reprise politique de la fin des années 90.
and this moment of a kind of return of the political at the end of the 90s.
Donc Tomate, c'est d'abord un effort de transmission, presque de couture entre deux périodes.
So Tomatoes kind of aims to function almost as a kind of transmission, or almost as a kind of weaving, connecting from these two moments that were separate.
Et à
Work of
partir
transmission.
Yes. Et à partir ça part d'un fait divers qui est l'affaire dite de Tarnac, liée au comité invisible.
So its point of departure is a news snippet, which is about the Tarnac affair and the invisible community.
Donc le surgissement dans le pays, l'espace médiatique, les discussions de l'opposition politique radicale.
Therefore, a kind of resurgence in the political sphere and in the media sphere of a kind of radical political position.
Et donc Tomate pose la question de comment la littérature peut écrire, réécrire, reprendre ce type de position sans forcément reprendre une langue révolutionnaire classique.
So Tomatoes kind of takes upon itself or asks itself the question of how can you write this kind of politics without necessarily, and I guess therefore understand it, without necessarily taking up the language of the classical revolutionary tradition.
Qu'est-ce que peut une littérature ou une poésie de recherche, qu'est-ce qu'elle peut dire, comment elle peut dire ce surgissement politique qui est en train d'essayer de se refaire?
So how can literature speak and write and understand and express and name this kind of political politics that is kind of in the process of reconstituting itself?
Donc le passage que je vais lire et que Marty va traduire pose la question du fascisme et de l'utilisation de ce mot.
And so the passage that we're going to read is it covers the issue of fascism and also how this word is used.
On peut commencer la lecture, non, Marty?
And wait, let's go ahead and
let's
start.
Go. Les villes européennes refaites se reconnaissent à ce que rien ne doit clocher et que c'est justement ce rien ne cloche qui cloche. La couleur dominante est le beige. Les dallages des rues piétonnes sont beiges. Les bâtisses historiques décapées sont beiges. Les pots de fleurs sont beiges. Les fleurs sont beiges. On poursuit les crottes marron foncé au jet d'eau. Sauf qu'il n'y a pas de crottes à Copenhague ou Madrid centre-ville. C'est un secteur définitivement beige. Pas un papier par terre et pas un chat pour crotter. Le sol y est beige, ou de ce gris discret des villes d'avant qui tendaient obscurément au beige, si bien qu'on a fini par céder. Plus tard, on m'explique que la ville, Copenhague ou Madrid, est dirigée depuis 15 ans par une municipalité conservatrice, pincée d'anciens franquistes ou droite beige, convertie à l'option politique permanente qui fait l'identité de l'Europe, le pastel. Up to you.
J'y vais.
Ouais.
You can recognize restored European cities by the fact that in them everything must be just right. and this everything must be just right is precisely what makes them not quite right. The dominant hue is beige. The cobblestone paving in the pedestrian streets is beige. The scoured historical buildings are beige. The flower pots are beige. The flowers are beige. They chase the dark brown turds away with a hose, except that there are no turds in Copenhagen or Madrid in the city centre. It's a definitively beige sector. Not a single wrapper on the ground and not a soul or cat around to drop a turd. The ground is beige, or it is this discreet grey cities used to have that tended so much toward beige that in the end they gave in. Later, someone explains to me that the city, Copenhagen or Madrid, has been run by a conservative municipal government for the last 15 years, seized by beige former Francoists or the beige right wing, converted to the permanent political option that constitutes Europe's identity. Pastel.
On ne dit pas fascisme comme ça pour un oui, pour un non. Je ne dis pas fascisme comme ça pour un oui, pour un non. Le fascisme, en Espagne par exemple, ces petits tricornes noirs de toreros et mitraillettes sur torse nu suant, pour ce qu'on voit quand on y va enfant en vacances. Ses mains sur la tête, ses rues dégagées en 30 secondes, cette exécution au garrot vil. Tu es assis sur une chaise, bras attachés aux accoudoirs, le garrot passe sur ta gorge, fais ça avec un gros élastique, celui pour arrêter le sang avant la prise, on le tourne sur ta nuque, ensuite ta tête pend. Le fascisme, c'est la détention administrative. Tu rentres en prison, tu ne sais pas quand tu sortiras, tu ne sais pas si tu sortiras. Le fascisme, c'est quand tu ne peux rien dire chez toi et surtout rien au téléphone. Si tu veux dire quelque chose, même anodin, intime, tu ne peux pas le dire chez toi. Tu dois aller loin, dans la nature ou dans un endroit bruyant, bord d'autoroute, hypermarché. Ainsi, le fascisme peut être décrit en une poignée de phrases, nettes. Et pourtant, non. Pourtant, pas seulement.
You don't say fascism at the drop of a hat. I don't say fascism at the drop of a hat. Fascism in Spain, for example, is those little black three-cornered hats bullfighters wear and machine guns strapped across sweaty bare chests from what you see when you go there on holidays as a child. It's hands on your head. It's the streets cleared in 30 seconds. It's execution by a garrote. You're sitting in a chair, arms bound to the armrests. The garrote is passed around your throat. Use a big elastic band to stop the flow of blood before the yank. They tighten it at the nape of your neck. Then your head hangs. Fascism is administrative detention. You go to prison. You don't know when you'll be released. You don't know if you'll be released. Fascism is when you can't say anything in your home, and definitely not on the telephone. If you want to say something, even trifling, intimate, you can't say it in your home. You have to go somewhere far, outside the city, or somewhere noisy, beside a freeway, or in a huge supermarket. So fascism can be described in a handful of phrases, neatly, and yet no, yet not only.
Le fascisme n'est pas seul, pas toujours seul, pas toujours si net, découpé. Le fascisme, c'est aussi la limo de Ben Ali, à fond sur la route Sfax-Tunis, voiture dégagée vite fait sur le bas-côté, dans une campagne verdoyante où courent fillettes à nattes en chemin pour l'école. C'est un festival de poésie féminine dont l'inauguration est faite par une rangée de dignitaires séparés du public par une rangée de flics assis au premier rang. Le fascisme, c'est aussi vestige, reste, habitude, incohérence, 5 ans, 20 ans après, ou un pressentiment, 10 ans, 1 an avant. Rend le monde poreux. Monte alors les signes d'un temps sombre que tu apprends à lire et reconnais en descendant lentement, comme Alice dans son puits très profond découvre qu'elle a le temps de regarder autour d'elle et de se demander ce qui va se passer. Souvent, tu frottes tes yeux pour accommoder, car le fascisme, en ses débuts ou en sa fin, n'est pas sûr.
Fascism is not alone, not always alone, not always so neat, delineated. Fascism is also Ben Ali's limo flooring it on the road between Sfax and Tunis, cars suddenly veering onto the shoulder to clear the way. in a verdant countryside where little plated girls run along to school. It is a women's poetry festival opened by a row of dignitaries separated from the audience by a line of cops in the front row. Fascism is also vestiges, remains, habits, inconsistencies. 5 years, 20 years later, or a premonition 10 years, 1 year before, makes the world porous. Then the signs of a dark time arise that you learn to read and recognize as you slowly descend, just like Alice, who in her deep well discovers that she has enough time to look around and ask what is going to happen. You rub your eyes often to adapt, for in its beginnings or at its end, fascism is uncertain.
On lit un deuxième extrait. Ouais. Je voulais juste... donc ça, c'est un moment du livre, et après, il y a d'autres passages un peu différents dans l'écriture.
So there's different moments in the book. I guess the book has a lot of different sections, even though it's quite short. We'll
Ouais.
read a different section.
Il y a par exemple un moment où j'utilise le système de Ducasse dans les poésies, d'Isidore Ducasse.
For example, where Nathalie uses some of the style, or takes a leaf out of the book of Isidore Ducasse and from his poésie.
Qui consiste
tu peux me dire la page aussi?
Peut-être, oui. Je ne vais pas le lire. Hein. C'était juste pour donner un exemple de ce moment où il transforme les phrases affirmatives en phrases négatives. Voilà.
Yeah, Isidore Ducasse famously inverts many famous phrases in a kind of, what is it, like a robotism of the avant-garde it's become now, which Nathalie uses and plays with in Thomas.
Parce qu'il y a un moyen de reprendre les outils de l'avant-garde pour démonter les discours tout faits.
It's become a kind of avant-garde procedure that is pretty well known, I guess very well known in France, of using this to attack conformist thought. Mais c'est où dans Thomas?
Pardon?
C'est quelle page dans Thomas?
Dans la version américaine.
Tu cherchais?
Mais je ne vais pas lire ça. Hein. C'était juste pour expliquer.
Ah, ok.
Et expliquer ce que tu dis qui est très juste là, à la fin, dans ta note. This leads to a kind of conflicting fabric of discourses, which is precisely the point. Tu dis ça voilà. Et je trouve que ça... Alors, c'est vraiment une phrase qui explique bien ce qui se passe dans Tomate.
Okay, Nathalie just cited the part from the afterword and said that it explains well what happens in what's going on in the work, which that it's working with a conflicting fabric of discourses.
A kind of conflicting fabric of discourses. C'est ça. Si tu veux, on peut lire page 39 alors, pour terminer.
Ok. Attends. Bah, commence.
Ok. Ouais. En France, on sait bien comment sonne la Révolution, parce qu'on connaît sa langue. C'est celle du XVIIIe siècle. Comment une prose classique française fait-elle entendre le son du canon en 2009? Périodes et lexiques typiques, fille au lieu de pute, pensée construite, rythme tenu et bien frappé sur sa fin, latin. Nous lirions en perruque, peu importe d'ailleurs, en perruque, sommes encore lecteurs en fait, écrivains maniant leur canne, bâtons de twirling dans Venise en folie. Sans cette prose, nous sommes sourds en France. Par conséquent, j'écris un livre muet. Je prends ce risque. Je ne puis écrire hors cette prose la révolte si je veux être entendu. Cette prose, quelle prose déjà? Une prose établie comme de Pavlov le chien, dont on rejoue périodiquement le grelot pour que s'y fassent les jeunes générations, soit un style noble. Que sont les beautés nouvelles du son du sabre chinois? mais déjà nous causons du son du sabre chinois en termes de beauté, ainsi que nous causions des beautés du style noble ou noblement insurrectionnel, de sa syntaxe équilibrée et son du clairon, tambour ou basse continue de Bordienne pour les pleurs contenus. Sans fin, nous tournons dans cette nuit sourde de la prose et nous y consumons. Tu as trouvé? Ouais.
As a result, I write a mute book. Oh, pardon. On the other hand, in France, we know what the revolution sounds like because we know its language. It's that of the 18th century. How does classical French prose make us hear the sound of cannon in 2009? Typical sentences and vocabulary, girls instead of whores, constructed thought, a taut rhythm with a punch at the end, Latin, as if we read in wigs. And no matter, in wigs we are still festive readers, still writers holding their canes, their twirling batons in a Venice gone mad. Without this prose, we are deaf in France. As a result, I write a mute book. I run the risk. I cannot write the revolt outside this prose if I want to be heard. This prose? Which prose again? A prose well established as are the dogs of Pavlov, whose little bell we do regularly ring for that the younger generations may become accustomed thereto, namely a noble style, such as is indeed the new beauty of the sound of the Chinese saber. But we're already talking about the sound of the Chinese saber in terms of beauty, as we were talking about the beauty of a noble or nobly insurrectional style, of its balanced syntax, of the sound of the bugle, drums, and basso continuo in Debord for uncried tears. Endlessly we turn in this deaf night of prose and are consumed.
Ok, c'est bon? Je lis le dernier paragraphe, là, il est déjà 53. Ouais, faut peut-être laisser la place à... Non? Ouais, ok, all right, merci. Merci beaucoup.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Nada.
Thank you, Nathalie and Marty. That was wonderful. Now we will go over to hear from Rob Halpern, who's been one of my favorite American poets for a long time and whose work on the new narrative movement has been inspiring and intriguing. And I just feel extremely proud that he worked with me on this book. So Rob, please take it away.
Am I here?
You're here, you're on.
Great. Well, thanks Patrick for all the hard work at Kenning and for your introduction and for placing me in the company of Nathalie and Adalber today. So much gratitude. I have no idea who's out there right now, but thanks for tuning in. I'll read a few poems from the book, and I'll preface that with just the first two paragraphs from a rather lengthy postscript entitled For Hieroglyphic Poetics. I began writing this sequence of poems as fascist aggression fomented during the weeks preceding the Unite the Right convergence of white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, August 2017. I was full of rage, disgust, and fear, while despairing in the knowledge that whatever writing I might do in response to the present moment would only reflect my impotence in the face of grotesque violence and fail to make a dent in the social surround if that were even writing's aim. At first, I referred to these poems as calendrics as they channeled the daily slew of emotional runoff, lending my rage, disgust, and fear some fabled form to keep it all from recrudescing in a barely somnolent paralysis whose waking dreams arrested sleep. But even at their best, the poems could only promise to quiet those dissipative energies long enough to organize them in some provisional structure, like a crystal of entropic decay, where the present might be said to flicker and refract. Studying calendrics off the beaches at Gaza. These formal feelings can only carry us so deep into night before rending the sentence, throwing me back on its partial drives, spinning things out of touch or reach, renting structures that expose the parts while hiding my shit in the light of day. The way the nation drags its bodies under jellyfish tides as I lose track of my own desire, or just the idea of owning anything in a sentence, which is pretty stupid, come to think about it. My tongue distends, an autonomous word bound over time to things whose meanings undo what they are, as if tinkering with the bank's metal instruments could measure the space between the moon's blank apogee and the orbit of Xena, where all the phonemes hit their limit, exchanging at unprecedented rates and yielding a universal gong before dissipating into the nameless ethers. I've never seen the things of which I write, like I never saw the cock that fucked me that autumn day in the woods, despite it all plowing deep into the forms I fail, the way I belong to sentences that are not of my own making, like history being what we failed to make. My mouth belongs to nothing but an idea of belonging soaked in auto-coolant and ethylene steam crackle made by some eponymous Gulf Coast growth venture unmoved by capital flight, carrying us deeper into night before the poem transports me to the end of what this production cannot feel. The fall of Raqqa. This morning reeks of fire in the north, where forest and vineyards smolder with signs of something bleak. The day, a rhinestone night, so many flakes of leaf and pine settling like the body's ashen source. This dusting awakens rushes in your hair, a fallout of debris moving us past the limits of poetry while stuck here inside the poem, where I can flirt with you without risking my frailty, floating freely like a limb void of my body's weight. I fall for the ruse of your circadian rhythm as though these words were blood and this line of verse a vein leading from your mouth, through which we sing the difference between pain and suffering before lapsing into old stock metaphors of the inner life and padded portfolios stuffed with other signs, as if our calamity had a dulcimer for a heart. I say in my dream that patriarchy is a structure through which violence expresses itself as value, but this has no context, alone stranded on an atoll, speaking to no one, although I might as well be at a fascist barbecue, which can be like an atoll, in that both share something with my poem, considered as an isolated incident in a sea of wreckage and waste. A shroud of smoke hovers above what doesn't trigger memories of gore absent the flesh, bobbing along in this phonemic arabesque, straddling the chasm between a wart-like mole on the periphery of your bosom and the destruction of an improbable country whose casualties exceed the reach of my song. On the mass extinction of parasites. So in my dream, I'm sitting on the edge of a broken porcelain tub, taking a dump, when a phalanx of cops files into the house. They keep me from standing up. I mean, I'm 5 months gone, pregnant, that is, and baffled by my own condition, so full of heavy metals leaching from the pipes, a whole network of circulating currents that feed the baby. I once used to think leeching meant being bled, but now they're saying that all of Japan could disappear in the Pacific and the new Nazis carry tiki torches. Their tongues grind against a lead pole, expecting a lame metal to come with them in a bovine spectacle of airborne contagions, and phrases like, well, I don't know, and they do have a right, in which case, so do we. To smother them in their own puke, they fashion the worst haircuts too, which makes it even harder for me to fantasize fucking them the way Janae once dreamt of a brown shirt's ass like a pyrotechnic sun with delicately crushed eggshell blue lighting up so fine and furry a skin. So the word leeching no longer seems to matter as I wake, embellished in grim wooziness, lodged inside relations I can't even see, with the news of some event whose effects are distributed across the plane and out of graphic earshot. My sonic eyesore portends this synesthesia of tympany and glue. I can smell the treated effluent externalized in my kitchen sink when the state sanctions a water crisis, turning life into a marketable good that can be traded for a prison, where the difference between the parole board and the lottery of surviving species just keeps on staring me down. My mouth resembles the shell of a clam. How feeble these poems feel, like little clots inside the furnace of circulation. I take them for my failing forms, like septic bladders. They yearn to be something more robust than themselves, a more promising solidarity or accomplice to anything but the endlessness of language, that infinite possibility of the invisible in Ralph Ellison, or the indefinite cave of your mouth, as if one could live inside that cavity, like a word or an egg. It might crack the thing the way butterfly bullets explode on impact, to shatter his jaw, debouching teeth, airborne colors of a leveraged buyout. No tongue can command the fluctuations of value, bearing no egress as supply chains pass from species to species. This halogen virus communicates by displacing perceptions of its own absence, becoming glass, or the purest equivalent of space, the way it expands inside hazmat and crown. On the specter of higher wages, who can explain this sudden jubilation, a swing inside the moon's dark mood, a grave from which we return at dawn, so lost inside extractions deal with the dead, to shed tender coins, my words attached to arcade nerve, a pissed elation, each emotion an adjunct to trade, whose algorithms replace my too excitable body, the way machines once replaced my dad. Like quant strategies, they pop the flesh of surplus hands as inventory annuls night's predations, the darkness streaming bounty's blight. I barely note the latex fibers and quality weave beneath my skin when we sleep, bearing nothing legible, no trace of the labor it takes to bring you to me through fields of tin and mines of rice. Just sink my name to what forgotten forms desire assumes, say Betamax or cylindrical phonography. Even the Dragon Ball franchise stands a chance of crushing the banks when, losing steam, they induce my measures fake calm. Uber creates real value. Some fucker on the radio just said that, and I'm like, so what's the relation between the production of real value and a murdering cop who gets off in the show's next segment without even seeing the inside of a cell. Now there's a question. Race being another form money assumes inside my gerrymandered house, where yellow police tape separates me from the grid and whatever sensation my hypertrophied prostate sings, the way I use repurposed hemp fiber to slow the flow of oxygen to the left lobe as I lose all feeling for the things I live among. But then value's not a thing, it's a relation that feels like cellophane or a ghost or a whiff of something foul, say a decomposing corpse or someone's liver burst into flame or a lung expanding in a luxury flat that blends well with flammable cladding. It's all material and it all connects the way a fillet of fresh cut meat connects me to a body prone in a prison just down the road, or my earbud to a fighter jet in Qatar. And I will end with this one called My Charms. My charms. When the sun shines on my poems, I still feel a little something burning in that sweet spot between the tibia and fibula. I mean, the one whose emptiness can't be named. It's unspeakable, this place. It resembles a charmed hole so snug around my throat, like the floating blank in logistics. It lets me buy my creams on demand. But when I open my eyes, these spells look like receipts for beer or gas. As their lines detach, they fall like ticker tape in the marketplace of public secrets. You know, there's always a sweet spot between the words for certain bones where some invisible force does all the hard labor, securing the tissue to maintain the connect. As sphincters release, they rush good feels on a world of things and all its circuits, linking me to myself through 100 profiles of friends. It's as if I could be everywhere at once, emanating like a conical sphere pointing to uncharted peripheries where real work gets done, the way power administers its outer rings, funneling cash through the backwash of some Laotian village near the plain of jars. Anywhere, accounts can be liquidated without touching the bodies. But there's something sentimental equating poems with candied trifles gathered from rubbish piled in a lot near Boise, or screws made in Peoria circa 1964 and found on a prairie in Southeast Asia, where the most distant piece of military hardware contains a piece of me as its civilizing mission inflates the meaning of my song. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. That was amazing. Incredible. Fabulous. And you read my favorite poem from the book, the Uber poem. So that's fortuitous, and thank you again. So we will next move to Mexico City, where Robin will introduce Adalber and read along with him.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Patrick, for bringing us all together today and for these beautiful and important books that you publish with such heart and commitment. It's really an honor to be part of the Kenning project in any way at all. And it's a joy to be here with Rob, with Nathalie, with Marty. Such a joy to listen to you all and get to know your books from afar, hopefully from closer by soon. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Adalber Salas Hernández, a poet, essayist, translator from Portuguese, French, and English, my dear friend. We are both going to be reading today from his book, The Science of Departures, La Ciencia de las Despedidas, which, as you'll see, is a book in 33 parts, 33 poems that each in some way speaks to or from some kind of goodbye, which could be exile, dispossession, death, the distance between language and experience, any form throughout history. Also, there are many historical characters as well as ones that are closer to our current moment. And so we will be going back and forth between Spanish and English. We're actually going to start with the English. And thank you so much to everyone who is listening and here with us today. I thought we could start, Adalber, if this is okay with you, with poem 23, Natural History of Debris, Lazarus. First came the breath, falling furious onto the waters, a few words half heard, raucous stones hurled against the pain of sleep. He's always struggled to get up in the morning. Defying all of death's codes, unfamiliar hands grab Lazarus by the shoulders and drag him into the midday light, abrupt as a cliff. They pry open his mouth and force in bitter breath, thump his chest until his heart revs up again, until the body's gutters fill once more with the forgetful, bloody torrent, motor oil, diesel fuel. He stumbles his way out of the sepulchre, blinded by the glare. He's lost his shroud, and the witnesses to the miracle can see his flesh darkened by putrefaction, striped with worms, the map of another world. The stench is overpowering. All cover their noses, some vomit. Lazarus blinks in the stubborn radiance. His dry gaze burns. He can't focus it. No one understands why he's been brought back to the world, but the newspapers are thrilled. A documentary is in the works, plus a reality show, Lazarus and 6 young people in a house, learning to surf or cooking in front of an audience. His photo is all over Twitter, hashtag loose him and let him go. Astrologists squabble over the birth chart of someone twice born. He keeps blinking. He gestures, stammers, drops his syllables, clumsy toys, groans, grunts. How to fire up the voice's soft machine again. The witnesses soon disperse. Lazarus is left alone, still at a loss for how to clothe his naked body, starting to understand that God is a blind muscle. Finally, he takes a sidelong glance and walks away, and that's the end of it.
Before I start reading, I would just like to thank everyone, just not only the people that is here in this virtual space, but also everyone that is watching us right now or maybe later, I don't know, in the unending now of these readings. So, Historia natural del escombro. Lázaro. Primero fue el aliento cayendo furioso sobre las aguas. Unas pocas palabras oídas a medias, piedras estridentes lanzadas contra la ventana del sueño. Desde niño le costaba despertar. Contra todos los fueros de la muerte, manos extrañas toman por los hombros a Lázaro y lo arrastran al mediodía abrupto como un acantilado. Abren su boca y a la fuerza empujan en ella la respiración amarga. Golpean su pecho hasta que el corazón arranca, los desagües del cuerpo se llenan otra vez con el torrente olvidadizo y sanguinolento, aceite de motor y diésel. Sale del sepulcro tropezando, encandilado. La mortaja se le ha caído y los testigos del milagro pueden ver su carne oscurecida por la podredumbre, estriada de gusanos, el mapa de otro mundo. El hedor es insoportable. Todos se cubren la nariz, algunos vomitan. Lázaro parpadea bajo el brillo contumaz, le arde, la mirada reseca, no puede enfocarla. Nadie entiende para qué ha sido traído de vuelta, pero los periódicos están encantados con la historia. Ya hay planes para un documental y un reality show. Lázaro con 6 jóvenes en una casa, aprendiendo a surfear o cocinando frente a una audiencia. Su foto está por todo Twitter, hashtag levántate y anda. Los astrólogos no se ponen de acuerdo para elaborar la carta astral de alguien que ha nacido 2 veces. Él sigue parpadeando, gesticula, balbucea, las sílabas se le caen, juguetes torpes, gemidos, gruñidos. ¿Cómo encender de nuevo la máquina suave de la voz? Al poco rato los testigos se dispersan. Lázaro se queda solo, aún sin atinar a cubrir su desnudez, empezando a entender que Dios es un músculo ciego. Finalmente miró al soslayo, se fue y no hubo nada.
Gracias, querido. I thought we could continue with poem 24, the next in the book. Gummy, semi-transparent gloves, bladeless scalpel, face mask, oversized white robe. I'm 15 years old and in the lab, in biology class, surrounded by tiny animals and jars of formaldehyde, plastic anatomical models, and precision instruments that no one has ever used. Every week, a hanging skeleton observes us from its corner as we struggle to understand the graceless, viscous secret kept by living bodies. Today, I had to bring in a cow's heart. I hauled its blackened, greasy weight around all morning long, packed in a cooler so it wouldn't rot. I've lugged it patiently. Now it's on the counter, laid out on the dissection table. It doesn't tremble when I open it, cutting through the fatty tissue as best I can, enduring the murky funk that clings to my throat. Elastic fibers, membranes, atria, ventricles, all resisting my touch, places where a rough flower grew, a cold and anxious ground that's no one's motherland. This is where the blood ran, conveying its belongings, its concrete contraband, through the pulmonary valve and then the aortic, which groaned thickly, straining as the liquid passed. An enormous instrument, atrocious, flesh and tense fat, clenched with rage, fold upon fold, just like mine, hidden in the chest's amniotic darkness among the springs, cogs, and tattered cables of the thoracic cage, far from the bitter border of all things, pulsing like a galaxy sunk into the distance, whose light erodes and ages before it ever reaches us. The device's only virtue was its blindness. Here in the purgatory of the table, between the body it was wrested from and the mute paradise of halogen bulbs, it's exposed, diminished, bringing to our sight the passageways traveled by the inarticulate voice that once nursed us all, the same that fed us the hoarse mud of life. Now it's quiet, stilled of rhetoric, mere scaffolding, a crossing point. It learned that distance is measured not in meters, but in vanishings, that I is not an other, that I is nobody, a chain of piled up throbs, noise, rust, prosody unpossessed by anyone.
Guantes semitransparentes, pegajosos, bisturilla sin filo, mascarilla, bata blanca demasiado holgada. Tengo 15 años y estoy en el laboratorio, clase de biología, rodeado de pequeños animales en jarras de formol, modelos anatómicos hechos de plástico e instrumentos de precisión que nadie ha llegado a utilizar. Cada semana, un esqueleto colgante nos mira desde su esquina, mientras nos esforzamos por comprender el secreto torpe y viscoso que guardan los cuerpos vivientes. Hoy tocó traer un corazón de res. Cargué toda la mañana con su peso negro, grasiento, encerrado en una hielera para que no se pudriera. Lo he llevado a cuestas, paciente. Ahora está en la mesa, sobre una tabla de disección. No se estremece cuando lo abro, atravesando el tejido adiposo lo mejor que puedo, aguantando el olor denso que se pega a la garganta. Fibras elásticas, membranas, atrios y ventrículos, todo resistente al tacto, sitios donde crecía una flora áspera, tierra ansiosa y fría que no es patria de nadie. Por allí pasaba la sangre llevando sus pertenencias, su contrabando de cemento a través de la válvula pulmonar para luego pasar por la aórtica que se estiraba en un mugido espeso. Un instrumento enorme, atroz, carne y grasa terca apretadas con furia, pliegue sobre pliegue justo como el mío, oculto en la oscuridad amniótica del pecho, entre resortes, engranajes y cables gastados de la caja torácica, lejos del borde amargo de las cosas, pulsando como una de esas galaxias hundidas en la distancia, cuya luz se erosiona y envejece antes de alcanzarnos. La única virtud de este aparato fue su ceguera. Aquí, en el purgatorio de la mesa, entre el cuerpo del que fue arrancado y el paraíso mudo de las lámparas halógenas, se encuentra expuesto, disminuido, ofreciendo a la vista los pasajes por los que corría la voz inarticulada que nos amamantó a todos alguna vez, la misma que nos dio de comer el limo ronco de la vida. Está quieto, sin retórica, puro andamio, lugar de paso. Supo que la distancia no se mide en metros, sino en desapariciones. Que yo no es otro, que yo es ninguno. Una serie de latidos amontonados, ruido y óxido, prosodia sin dueño.
Simple words: rain, sun, house, tree, road, mother, father, brother, laughter, now, animal, fear. Simple and dependable as fingers. Complex words: name, number, blow, shout, question, bullet, accusation, past, future, patience, animal, fear. When I was little, I often went to the Natural History Museum. It was a large white building with a portico invaded by faux Doric pillars facing a circular courtyard. Through the entrance on the right was a wing devoted to the planet's geological eras. Layers of earth like shut eyelids, impossibly far-off countries sleeping forever beneath our feet. Places and periods I couldn't fluently pronounce, all christened just so that the distance wouldn't burn our hands. The earth hoarded lives, shed skins with impunity. Fossils were left as proof, obscene as Polaroids of a world that has nothing to say to us. A little deeper in a whole wing was devoted to the animal kingdom. Encased behind quavering displays, all kinds of specimens watched people walk past with glass eyes. The skins of their dead bodies had been meticulously removed, salted, rehydrated, tanned. Once dried and muted, without the idiotic murmur of their vital fluids corralled inside them, they'd been arranged in crowded flames. Birds of prey perched on plastic and foam rubber branches that grew and lengthened out of time. Beasts with yellow fangs and carious pelts, distracted herbivores stagnating in endless poses, grazing, standing guard, hunting, being hunted, caught in the deaf mimicry of desire. I'd move with caution back to the wall, both terrified and curious, softly repeating all the simple words I could remember. The throng of fauna made me hope I'd run into a stuffed angel at any moment. My grandmother had told me they were God's own beasts of burden. But I'd never make it to the end of the hall. There weren't enough simple words in the world, not enough to buy my passage from one of fear's levees to another. I'd leave just as carefully, trying not to draw attention to myself, to keep from disturbing that cold somnambulism. I've never returned as an adult. Those animals tamed by chemical preservatives told me what they had to. A poem is a predator that has been hunted, flayed, and tenderized, whose flesh is gone, whose skin is fixed, menacing and ridiculous to a skeleton of simple and complex words.
Palabras simples. Lluvia, sol, casa, árbol, calle, madre, padre, hermano, risa, ahora, animal, miedo. Simples y confiables como los dedos. Palabras complejas. Nombre, número, golpe, grito, pregunta, bala, acusación, pasado, futuro, paciencia, animal, miedo. cuando era niño solía visitar a menudo el Museo de Ciencias Naturales. Era un edificio grande, blanco, con un pórtico invadido por falsas columnas dóricas frente a una plaza circular. Al traspasar la entrada, a mano derecha, había un ala dedicada a las eras geológicas del planeta. Capas de tierra como párpados cerrados, telones de una obra que nadie sabe dónde empieza, países imposiblemente remotos, dormidos para siempre bajo nuestros pies. Lugares y períodos que no podía pronunciar con soltura, a los cuales solo pusieron nombres para que no nos quemara las manos tanta lejanía. El planeta acaparaba vidas, mudaba de piel impunemente. Quedaban los fósiles como pruebas, como instantáneas obscenas de un mundo que nada tiene que decirnos. Un poco más adelante había toda una sección dedicada al reino animal. Encerrados tras vitrinas temblorosas, especímenes de toda clase miraban a la gente pasar con ojos de vidrio. Habían retirado meticulosamente las pieles de sus cuerpos, las habían salado, rehidratado y curtido. Una vez secas y calladas, sin el rumor idiota de los fluidos vitales encerrado en ellas, habían sido colocadas sobre armazones rellenos. Aves de rapiña posadas sobre ramas de plástico y goma espuma que crecieron fuera del tiempo. Fieras de dientes amarillos y pelambre cariada. Herbívoros distraídos, estancados en las más diversas poses, pastando, vigilando, cazando y siendo cazados, atrapados en la mímica sorda del deseo. Yo caminaba con precaución, la espalda contra la pared, tan aterrado como curioso, repitiendo en voz baja todas las palabras simples que podía recordar. Entre tanta fauna, esperaba toparme en cualquier momento con un ángel disecado. Mi abuela me había dicho que eran las bestias de carga de Dios. Pero nunca alcanzaba el final de la sala. No había suficientes palabras simples en el mundo, no para comprar mi paso de una orilla a otra del miedo. Me retiraba con el mismo cuidado, tratando de no atraer atención sobre mí, de no perturbar ese sonambulismo frío. No he vuelto de adulto. Esos animales amansados por los conservantes químicos me dijeron lo que debían. El poema es un depredador que ha sido cazado, desollado, macerado, cuya carne se ha perdido y cuya piel cuelga, amenazante y ridícula, sobre un esqueleto de palabras simples y palabras complejas.
We will end with the last poem in the book, 33. Here's my passport. Yes, my visa's valid. I have the papers to confirm it. The purpose of my visit? Tourism. No, I'm not transporting any alcohol or tobacco. No, I don't have any unpasteurized products, organic materials, or unsanitary trinkets. I haven't been to a farm recently. I can't remember the last time I did. I don't have a license to carry firearms. I've never touched a gun. In my carry-on luggage, there are no bottles over 300 milliliters in volume. The purpose of my visit? I travel for the same reason as everyone else. Out of innocence, or because I believe what I read in books, that there's somewhere out there where my name won't reach me, where I can finally take it in vain. No, there are no whips, handcuffs, vibrators, or harnesses in my luggage, or documents essential to some nation's peace. I'm not transporting animal or vegetable species. I left my carnivorous plants behind in childhood. Any organs I carry are neatly tucked away under my skin, some prematurely coated in rust and fat. These pills, you ask? Circulation can't stay static. I can't have any baffled blood running through my veins. My breath can't stall in my throat like a fist of fog. It'd shatter my teeth and palate. The purpose of my visit? Because I'm no longer myself and my home is no longer my home. You, sir, with your badges and your uniform, your anthem and your pledge of allegiance, you'll never understand that a country is a handful of stolen words, and someday they must be returned. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm leaving the words wherever I can, wherever they'll let me, even if their taste has soured. I'm paying off a debt with these bleary words, which blink in the zenith lighting. In the city where I was born, everyone has their debts, and there's always someone to collect them. There, miracles are a danger like any other, a stray bullet, a natural disaster. There, all skins wake with the same innocent hangover. The purpose of my visit? Because in the places where no one speaks my language, the body is a disappearance. There's a transparency that suddenly gangrenes my flesh. No syllable can restore me. No one can see me. But I don't travel without a suitcase. My city is made of paper. I can fold it up and stuff it in my pocket. It's shaped like a notebook, like a knowing touch. There, the saints brawl, change water into rum, drive empire motorcycles, and sleep off their trifling eternity in clay statues. In my city, we carry our dead in our pockets. You can't leave them at home. They disappear. They tear off into the beyond or are stolen for resale. They don't leave so much as a little pillar of salt in exchange. It's not really a city. It's a slow fever that eats at the valley, haggard, furious. The purpose of my visit? I've spent years dreaming of a whale that swallows me up and shelters me for months behind its plaster teeth in the belly's soft night before it finally spits me out on unfamiliar shores.
Aquí tienen mi pasaporte. Sí, mi visa está vigente. Tengo los papeles que lo confirman. ¿Motivo del viaje? Personal. No transporto alcohol o tabaco. No llevo conmigo alimentos sin pasteurizar, materiales orgánicos, curiosidades insalubres. No he estado recientemente en una granja. No recuerdo la última vez que estuve en una granja. No poseo licencia para portar armas de fuego. Nunca he tocado una. En mi bolso de mano no hay botellas con más de 300 miligramos de contenido. 300 mililitros de contenido. Motivo del viaje. Viajo por las mismas razones que todo el mundo, por ingenuidad, por creer lo que dicen los libros, que hay un lugar donde no me alcanzará mi nombre, donde podré tomarlo finalmente en vano. No, en mi equipaje no hay látigos, esposas, vibradores, arneses, tampoco documentos imprescindibles para la paz de alguna nación. No traslado especies animales o vegetales. Dejé las plantas carnívoras en la infancia. Los órganos que llevo están pulcramente guardados bajo mi piel, algunos prematuramente cubiertos por el óxido y la grasa. Todas estas pastillas. La circulación no puede quedarse estática, no puede haber sangre perpleja en las venas, la respiración no puede estancarse en la tráquea como un puño de bruma. Me rompería los dientes y el paladar. Motivo del viaje. Porque yo ya no soy yo, ni mi casa es ya mi casa. Usted, con sus insignias y su uniforme, su himno y su juramento a la bandera, no termina de entender que un país es un puñado de palabras robadas. Y algún día hay que devolverlas. Eso hago justo ahora. Dejo las palabras por donde puedo, donde me permiten, aunque ya tengan un sabor rancio. Pago una deuda con estas palabras legañosas que parpadean bajo la lámpara cenital. En la ciudad donde nací, cada quien tiene sus deudas y siempre hay alguien que las cobra. Allí los milagros son un peligro como cualquier otro, una bala perdida, un desastre natural. Allí todas las pieles madrugan con la misma resaca inocente. Motivo del viaje, porque en los lugares donde nadie habla mi lengua, el cuerpo es una desaparición. Hay una transparencia que gangrena de golpe la carne. Ninguna sílaba me carga, nadie puede verme. Pero no viajo sin equipaje. Mi ciudad está hecha de papel, se dobla y se guarda en el bolsillo, tiene la forma de un cuaderno, de un tacto cómplice. En ella los santos atracan, transmutan el agua en ron, manejan motos Empire y duermen su mínima eternidad dentro de estatuas de arcilla. En mi ciudad llevamos nuestros muertos en el bolsillo. No se los puede abandonar en casa, desaparecen, se van al más allá o los roban para venderlos. No dejan a cambio ni un montoncito de sal. No es realmente una ciudad, es una fiebre lenta que se come el valle, trasnochada, colérica. Motivo del viaje. Desde hace años sueño con una ballena que me traga, me alberga durante meses detrás de sus dientes de yeso en la noche blanda de su estómago para finalmente escupirme en costas extrañas. Gracias.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adalber. Robin, that was amazing. It was especially fun to read along in a book I typeset. Typesetting a book is a very strange way to encounter poetry. This was much more pleasant, much more informative, if you will. So I've been looking at the chat, I guess, on YouTube, and there's nothing but praise there. There are no questions. It's all wonderful, merci, bravo. It's thank you all for this wonderful reading. It all sounds just like that. And I guess what that tells me is that everyone was so articulate and brilliant that our viewers and listeners are either intimidated or entirely, almost supernaturally convinced, and they don't want to sully all this with a conversation, a nuts and bolts conversation. So there you have it. I'm also trying to figure out how to get everyone on screen at once. Let me do that before we say goodbye. I'll remove pins, even my own. No, that's not working. Okay, let's do this. Robin, thank you. Goodbye. Wave goodbye to the world.
Goodbye.
There you go. Adalber, say goodbye.
Bye.
Ciao.
And thank you again.
Thank you.
Rob from San Francisco, ciao for now.
Ciao.
Nathalie, au revoir, merci beaucoup.
Au revoir, merci.
I will see you in June, I hope.
Okay.
I am coming to France.
Génial.
Look out. And Marty, at last, from Berlin, thank you and good night.
Ciao, ciao. Thanks a lot. Thanks.